Hello everyone, Jolene here from Bookworm Adventure Girl. Welcome back. I hope that you are all doing well. It's been raining like crazy here. This is where I like to talk about the books that I'm reading. I like to read diverse books and I highlight a lot of Canadian literature. If you are new, thank you so much for checking out my channel. Please hit subscribe and stick around. Today I am going to be recommending 10 science fiction books that I have really enjoyed. These recommendations are especially for readers who may not like science fiction. If you've watched my channel for a while, then you probably know that I don't read a lot of science fiction or fantasy books. You probably know that I read Canadian literature, sometimes sci-fi, fiction, non-fiction, but rarely do I talk about sci-fi or fantasy. When I go into a bookstore, I am fine if I never see the science fiction section or the fantasy section. I'm just not really drawn to go there. But I'm not against those things, and sometimes I've found myself, even saying I don't read sci-fi or I don't read fantasy, but that's actually not true. I may not read a lot of it, but I'd like to try it now and then and kind of dabble in it a bit here and there. And there are several books that I have really enjoyed in both genres, in science fiction and in fantasy. So there are books that, can have a bit or even a lot of overlap of those two genres, but sci-fi is usually, as the name suggests, about science and technology, whereas fantasy will have, magic and supernatural elements, and sci-fi is more conceivable, as something that is possible in our world. And if it could happen in our own world, I guess. Whereas fantasy may not be possible and usually has more like world building and that kind of thing. And both can happen in one book, of course. So it turns out that there are sci-fi books and fantasy books that I have enjoyed, and in my reading, I have learned kind of what type of sci-fi and fantasy books that I like. So what works for me and what doesn't. So for this video, I am going to focus on sci-fi books, and in an upcoming video, I will give recommendations for some fantasy books that I have enjoyed. So these books aren't in any particular order, but these are all science fiction books that I've read and that, I've just loved. Some of them are even in my favorites of all time. So I'm going to kick it off with the Canlit Queen herself, Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood. This is the first of a trilogy, and it's really a dystopian love triangle of sorts. You will notice that most of the books actually on the list are dystopian type novels. That's something that I learnt is I like dystopian or post-apocalyptic kind of stories, if they're clever, if they're well written. So this is definitely a post-apocalyptic novel, which takes place after a plague has wiped out most of humanity. And the main character is Snowman, who was known as Jimmy in the world before. His best friend growing up was Crake, and Snowman thinks that he is the last human, and he is basically surrounded by a new breed of humans that have been genetically engineered, and they are called the Children of Crake. So there are some really interesting themes in this, and if I remember correctly, there's blue glowing penises. I seem to remember something about that. I think that's true. And I can't imagine that I would make that up. So the next book I have, The Martian. I just grabbed a couple of the books. I'll put a picture up. The Martian by Andy Weir. It's true that this is one of those rare occasions where I do think that I liked the movie more, but not because the book isn't good. The book is very good. If you like science-y stuff, then this is for you. If you like funny books, then this is for you. If you enjoy books about space, then this is for you. Mark Watney and his team are the first to go to Mars, and they run into a situation, call it, and Mark Watney finds himself stranded alone on Mars. So chances of dying before his team can come back to get him, if they can even come back to get him, is pretty high. And I just thought that this was a fantastic story, even if there was a lot of science-y stuff that I didn't, necessarily understand or care about in my case. I still found the story compelling and the main character endearing. Plus there's some really great themes in this as well. And I think that's why I like the movie more, is that it doesn't have all that science-y stuff in the same way. Okay, Moon of the Crusted Snow by Waubgeshig Rice. Another book that, although more subtle in some ways, it has a lot of depth, and it really makes you think about some interesting themes. So this takes place in a remote northern indigenous community, and when something happens, and the community is so isolated, they don't even know, what has happened. But they quickly begin to figure out how they will survive. So there is tension between the community, among the community, but really the community and a stranger who shows up. And it shows the difference in ways of thinking. The story shows the importance of maintaining tradition and culture. And I read this book twice and loved it even more the second time. It was so good. So I read it once before the pandemic and then once afterwards. And then there's a sequel, which is also worth reading, that ripped my heart out a little. Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel is another dystopian apocalyptic book that I still think of often. I loved so much about this book. Again, I read it just before the pandemic. We travel from Toronto, Ontario to Michigan. And there's a significant importance put on keeping art alive in the aftermath of the demise of basically most of humanity. There are scenes in this book that will never leave me. There's the traveling symphony, like the museum, the ending. I won't give spoilers, but so good, so good. Sticking with similar themes is An Ocean of Minutes by Thea Lim. This time it includes time travel. Another thing that I don't mind, it turns out, in sci-fi or fantasy is time travel, as long as it's written well and it's believable. And in this case it is. So we meet Frank and Polly. Frank gets the flu virus that is killing people, and Polly finds out that there is this company that has invented time travel. And in the future they have a cure. So if she is willing to travel to the future to work, the company will give the treatment that Frank needs. So of course, Polly agrees because she wants to help Frank, and they plan to meet at a certain, place and time in the future, on a specific date kind of thing. So things don't go as planned. In fact, they go very wrong. And we follow Polly, and like her, we don't know what has happened to Frank, so we kind of stick with her storyline. So although the fairy tale part of my heart wants this to work out one way, the way that it does work out is probably more accurate to how it would. And it made me search my heart a bit more to reflect on, like, what would I do? What would I have done in that situation, and how difficult it would be. I still think of this book a lot. Yeah, it's an interesting one. 11/22/63 by Stephen King, staying with the whole time travel theme. This is one of my, if not my, favorite Stephen King novel. even though it's massive, like this is a huge book, it doesn't feel that way when you're reading it. So Jake Epping, he's an English teacher who frequents a diner in this little town in Maine. And one day the owner of the diner, he looks very unwell and he tells Jake that he has lung cancer. And even though the day before he was in perfect health, the diner owner reveals a secret to Jake. The pantry of the diner is a time slip, which leads to the same town, but it brings you to September 9th, 1958, every time you go in. Plus, no matter how long you stay in the town, whenever you return, it is only 2 minutes later. So you can spend a day, you can stay 10 years, it doesn't matter. When you return, it's 2 minutes. So the diner owner was attempting to stop the assassination of JFK, hoping that it would change, many things that have happened since then and in our history. But now that he is ill, he is basically recruiting Jake to take over for him. And I loved this story. I loved the details of the time period and the things that are in the book that you just might not think of. I thought that this was an excellent, excellent book. How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu, I think it is. Okay, so this is a collection of interconnected short stories. Some of the stories I liked better than others. Okay, so these weren't all fantastic for me, but there are definitely a few of them that stand out that I loved and that I still think of every once in a while. So like the theme park that's for terminally ill children, yeah, that won't leave me anytime soon. And there's a couple others as well. Lesser known monsters of the 21st century. This is by Kim Fu. This is another collection of short stories. And again, there are a few that have, just really stuck with me. This collection leans a little more on the technology side of sci-fi. I loved the story about the husband and wife who they basically take turns killing each other, but not to worry because they have a special 3D printer that brings them back to their original form every time. There's another story that is about a simulator that will recreate a day that you can spend with a loved one who has passed away. Another story is about a world where people have lost their sense of taste, and there's one person who is basically profiting from ways for people to relive the memories of their favorite food, their favorite dishes. So I found these stories to be so unique and clever and very well written. The final two books are really classics. I forgot to show this. Okay. The Giver by Lois Lowry. When we meet Jonas, who is the main character, he lives in a utopian world where crime is really low and no one really experiences pain. Everyone has jobs that they love and that kind of fit their gifts and their talents. So when Jonas turns 12, he finds out what he will do to help the community. And he learns that he will be training to be the new receiver. And this is when Jonas learns that the world used to be very different than the one that he's currently in. And this is such an excellent read and a good book to reread as well. I've read it twice. I'll probably do another read of it sometime. Then the 10th book that I think you will enjoy, even if you don't like sci-fi, is Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. This is also a classic. It was first published in 1966. And this book ripped my heart out in such a good way. It's simplistic, yet it has so much depth. And Charlie is a character that I think of quite often. Charlie has a low IQ, and when the book begins, we see how the people around him react to him, and when he has the opportunity to have surgery to make him more intelligent, Charlie does it. Of course, he wants to be like everyone else. And over time, his intelligence does increase until he is smarter than most people. And the scientists and the researchers, they have, they've been working with mice. And one of the mice is Algernon. And when Algernon begins to deteriorate, Charlie is smart enough to know what that means for him too. So the themes in this book are so powerful. This is one of my favorite books of all time, and it's sci-fi. Who would have thought? So if you are someone who, doesn't usually read sci-fi, maybe you're like me and said, I don't read sci-fi, I strongly recommend these books. I think that they are all incredible in their own way, and will kind of allow you to dabble in some sci-fi that isn't too over the top, right? So please let me know if there are any books that you would add to this list, or if you've ever read any of these books. What do you think? Do you agree that these might be good for someone who normally would not go to a sci-fi section in a bookstore? I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day, and don't forget to make every day an adventure.